first VDHA podcast. This is a bit of a trial run. It might be a more regular event, we hope, but this is orchestrated to have a chat mainly and have a chat on our own terms. We get bombarded a lot by media questions, and sometimes it's hard to answer and get our opinions across. So we thought it would be a great chance to put together a podcast with our executive and just have a relaxed conversation, a couple of drinks, and just talk through a few issues that we're all facing at the moment. So firstly, I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Dan Straub, the president of the VDHA. And we've got Jay, our secretary / treasurer, and Marco, our vice president. So welcome, guys. And Jay, we'll just flip to you firstly and just introduce yourself, mate, and tell us a little bit about your background and how things have been for you in the last week from hearing an announcement Saturday a week ago.
Well, firstly, how are we, Marco and Dan? You know, it's really exciting, obviously, to try this out for the first time, and if it's successful, look forward to hopefully making a few more with us. But look, let's start with the 6th of February when we received that announcement. So obviously that announcement was just a kick in the guts, and it was a kick in the guts for a number of reasons. But the fact that they did it sneakily on a Saturday at, I think it was maybe 11:44, that we and the other stakeholders, the VDHA and the other stakeholders, we received an email saying this is their recommendations, and within 5 minutes it was posted on social media. It was a really shocking result. The most modified duck season in the history of all the season considerations and modifications. So it's the most modified and out of the seasons. So at the same time, there's the quail season and the duck season, and one of them is politicized, and that is duck hunting. And duck hunting obviously was heavily modified, whereas quail hunting, which isn't heavily politicized and requires very similar conditions, water equals birds, that they didn't get any modifications because there's no political pressure on it. So to say I'm disappointed, Dan, is an understatement.
Yeah, no, I feel you, Jay. I think we were all very disappointed. At the time I heard the announcement, I was out working with my father and brother, and it just gutted us. And we're all hunters. I'm a 5th generation hunter and was lucky enough to grow up hunting and under the guidance and training of my grandfather and my old man. And that relationship, it really stems strongly across family and friends who might not see each other from year to year, and congregate and rally around and share the excitement and anticipation about the duck season, and to have that announcement come through, the three of us just dropped tools and didn't know what to think. We just had to walk around the paddock for a few minutes and gather our thoughts and try and reconvene there. It was really, really hard to take, and we're still trying to find out some justification on why it actually happened. We'll go to you, Marco, and how did you feel when you heard the announcement last Saturday, mate?
Well, Daniel, I've been hunting since I was 12 years old. Duck hunting is my first passion, I suppose. I'm very passionate about working gun dogs, so I also hunt quail and small game on top of that. But duck hunting is where I started, with a family friend that introduced me to it. He took me under his wing, introduced me to setting up decoys and all the stuff that we do. And it really, I really loved it. It really sort of touched my soul. How did I feel at the announcement? Well, I must say I wasn't totally surprised. Unfortunately, it's become a trend over the last few years We're going to get a modified season. The thing that infuriates me, Daniel, is that it's become a political game. It's got nothing to do with game management. I followed the scene in Europe a little bit and in America, but mainly Europe. And their associations. In fact, when I first got my license in Italy a couple of years ago, after I'd got my pass, I was asked by the people that tested me, would I join the association in their releasing game programs that they have every year. So, and that to me is game management. Our game management authority, all it seems to do year after year after year is have big brag session on Facebook about the amount of hunters they prosecute. They don't intervene when we're being harassed by the protesters. They certainly don't do any game management, and they pander to, I believe, a loud voice from the from the Green Movement, from Animal Justice Party and the rest. So that to me is really, really frustrating, because as a hunter, I've always worked on ethics. I hunt for food mainly. That's my motivation. So I respect if there's no birds. I understand that we've got to modify season accordingly, but it just isn't the case. Certainly this year is not the case where we should have suffered such. It's actually a slap in the face. It's humiliating what they've done this year.
Yeah, it really is. I'm glad you brought up, Marco, your experience from hunting in Italy. I'd like to hear a bit more about that. Can you elaborate a bit more on how it was growing up and hunting in Italy to what you've found now here in Australia? The differences in the culture, for one. Is there much of a difference, do you think?
Oh, I didn't hunt in Italy because I left Italy when I was 5, but I remember Dad being able to basically put the gun on his shoulder sling his gun out the door and go hunting. I was very, very surprised to go back to Italy some 40 years later and find out that in a lot of areas, it's still pretty much the same. It's really, really liberating. I actually got a passion for hunting all over again. First of all, the vegetation. Australia tends to be a lot more sort of farmed, whereas a lot of Europe and Italy, especially where I've been, it's just wild country. But it's so liberating. You don't have to ask permission. Once you get your license, you've got to respect all the, obviously, the different stages of the agriculture process. But then you don't have to ask permission. You basically go hunting. And it was just a breath of fresh air because, as you know, as hunters here, we are heavily discriminated against. We are sort of slotted in society as being, some sort of a weird type of people that just want to kill things. Nothing's further from the truth. I spent $30,000 importing gun dogs to Australia because of my passion. And all I want to do is have an opportunity to work my dogs during the season. Just go and sit in a duck blind and, hunt some ducks and see the fruits of my training with those dogs. And here we're just completely discriminated against. Look, it's happening all over the world, but Australia's, in my opinion, it's leading the race.
Yeah, no, I agree totally, Marco. Jay, did you have something to add there? Before we go on, what are you drinking tonight, Jay?
Well, look, I'm hitting the hard stuff tonight, Dan. Following the news of we're going into another lockdown, I kind of took the excuse and encouragement from some peers to have a few drinks before we go into lockdown. And as a result, I was a little bit half cut this morning, but
no, it's understandable. And after the week we've had, mate, and the amount of work that you've put in on social media and phone calls and emails, you deserve to let your hair down, as does Marco. And yeah.
Well, I got no chance of that, Daniel.
No, I'm the same. I can't literally let it down, but to enjoy a few whiskeys, and it just helps to make it a little bit more relaxed and a comfortable atmosphere. I'm actually one of my favourites tonight, guys. I'm having an old fashioned. I thought this might have been a great chance to break out a bottle of whiskey that I've been hanging on to for a while. It's a single barrel Blanton's single barrel select whiskey, which is a little bit special. That was a present, so I thought, why not? It's a good enough excuse to break out the flash stuff tonight and have a sneaky little drink and relax a little bit while we talk. So
yes, yeah, definitely. Old fashioned is one of my favourite drinks too.
Oh, I love it. You know, I make them a lot, and they're very simple. Just a little bit of sugar, a little bit of bitters. Two shots of whiskey and some lemon peel, orange peel. Sorry, they really are very simple. I absolutely love them.
Yeah.
But, anyway,
yeah,
Jay,
fantastic.
Sorry, mate. Yeah. What do you feel, Jay? How did we get to this point? How do you feel we got to this point in time of the bombardment from animal activists, for one? And we're not the only ones that are suffering. It's really affecting the agricultural industry as well, mainly livestock agriculture. But we seem to be the scapegoats, and we get publicised the most. What are your thoughts, mate, on how we sort of got to this stage?
Well, and I'm going to summarise it with one word, and it's complacency. Yeah. For the past 10, 20 years, you know, there has been a small attack on hunters and our way of life. And it's always been, I remember, I'm going to divert back when I was a young child, and I was, you know, it might have been 1996, you know, or I would have been about the same age as my son. I remember watching The Current Affair and seeing Laurie Levy on the steps of Parliament with the duck carcasses, and the Channel 9 or whoever it was saying, you know, that there's a push to ban duck season. And I remember running to my dad, and I said, Dad, they're going to ban duck season. And he looked at me and he said to me, he goes, oh, they do it every year, son. Because they do it every year, son. We just ignore them. Don't worry about them. And that's what I did. I ignored them. I didn't worry about them. And I know 90%, 95% of hunters did the exact same thing, because we pay our memberships to our hunting organisations and we expect them to represent us. And that's worked for 20-odd years. Why wouldn't it work now? Well, the fact of the matter is we've stayed the same. You know, we hunt and we have a tradition that's, you know, that we love and we change, and that's all we do. Whereas the people that are opposed to us, you know, but while we're out there every season or every year preparing, they're behind the scenes, and they're working the media, they're working the public, they're doing all these sorts of things. And I use this reference quite a while, but you know, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And you know, the hunting community has just been great. You know, been driving around the highway without making a peep. Whereas the animal justice and the animal liberation movement and all that sort of stuff, they've been squeaking non-stop that eventually they've got so much attention now that we find ourselves where we were last Saturday on the 6th of February, where the government or the Game Management Authority, which is obviously heavily stacked by and infiltrated by animal liberation sympathisers and stuff like that, that this has all happened because of our complacency. They've had a clear agenda. We know that they've been working on it, but we just saw them too weak as a threat, that we ignored them. And unfortunately, they grew up a little bit, and they were able to do what they've managed to turn the political tide around. And that's obviously where you know, the VDHA came along in 2020, because the writing was well beyond on the wall, and we needed to do something.
Yeah, I agree, Jay. As a hunting community, we've always been in that frame of mind. We just want to get on with our life. We don't want to have confrontation. Obviously, we've seen the acts that the protesters have done out in the swamps, and the words that they call us, and the signs that they write, and have been very vocal. And
Dan, I just want to add on to that. Last year at the swamp and all that sort of stuff, I had my 7-year-old. He was 7 years old at the time, and I was at the swamp. We didn't even get any birds. We were just out because we like to do that. And we come across some animal protesters, and they said face to face, within 5 meters away from us, to me and my 7-year-old son, that I hope you guys die. And I had to explain to my son afterwards that they didn't mean what they're saying, and they're just a little bit confused. But the reality is they knew exactly what they said. And, for some reason, it's a right to say those things to a hunter who's just trying to provide for his family and do something that's within the outdoors and within his rights. But if you were to say that to anybody else in the street, you'd be criticised for it.
Yeah, it seems to be there's one rule for the animal activists on the swamp, and there's one rule for everyone else. And I've been in that same situation, called names, abused, hindered, harassed, and you, to some extent, you have to ignore it, and hopefully they move on. And they don't these days. They don't move on. They gang up on hunters, and they bombard 3 and 4 to one hunter, and they'll just follow you around, breaking the law and coming within that 10 meters and throwing abuse. And all we want to do is just harvest food for our family, live our tradition, and respect our elders that have passed, that showed us this way of life. And it's really hard. Marco, how do you think we can sort of move forward with the image, and how do we take that next step in showing showing the emotional effect that the protesters in particular, but also the acts from from the state government put onto us as individuals?
Well, I think that we need to show the government that we are probably one of the most discriminated against groups in society. I mean, there's all sorts of groups. I'm not going to name them. And I don't necessarily agree to a lot of groups and their activity and their ideology, but I just let people live the way they want to live. I mean, if they're not affecting me, that's fine. But hunting to me is not a sport. It's not a pastime. It's a way of life. It's, if a homosexual can say you're born that way, I was definitely born a hunter, because I remember as soon as I started to walk, basically, I was looking outside, sparrows and blackbirds. And, I was thinking, now, how can I catch them? And as soon as I could, I started playing with slingshots and all sorts of things. So, to me, it's a way of life. There's nothing I enjoy more. It's that DNA that's building me. I mean, I love fishing as much as I love hunting. I guess it's that hunter-gatherer thing that us humans are imprinted with. And I just want to pursue what is me. That's my identity. That's what I love doing. How can we move forward? Myself, I think one of the biggest things we need to promote in Australia is that game is to be taken for food. And that's it. I mean, you go to Europe and they shoot, thrush, which is probably a little bit smaller than a quail. They've got different types of migratory birds, and you follow you follow some of the forums, some of the groups. They come up with all sorts of recipes. Do we need to shoot game? Well, in hindsight, we can go and buy a steak from the supermarket or a chook. The thing that I don't understand is that, in my opinion, anybody that eats meat should not be against hunting. Now, I can understand that there's a minority, there's a group of people in society that are vegans or vegetarians, but they are a small minority. I think the statistics is it's only 1% of the population in Australia are vegans. Now, my view is, if you eat meat, you should not criticise me because I want to go hunting. Because if you've worked in an abattoir, which I have, it's not before that chop gets on your plate, before that porterhouse gets served to you at a pub, before that chicken, before you buy that pot and palmer at the pub, that chicken is hanging on a conveyor belt going through blades and it chops its head off. And before that, that chicken's been living in a cage, okay? And I've worked in an abattoir. When the sheep and the cattle marched into the place where they're going to slaughter them, they can smell blood. They know they're going to get killed. Opposed to a wild an animal that's roaming free, a duck is flying and just enjoying its life. And as part of course of life, there's a time to live and a time to die. I shoot that bird and I respect what I shoot. I will take it home, pluck it and prepare it. And that I think is what we have to embrace in Australia, first and foremost. When the anti-hunting movement started, I guess for some years, we all thought it was going to be a joke. And certainly we used to go to the meetings held by the leading hunting organisations, and they told us that, don't worry, they're going to go away. Well, I think they should have woke up, 10 years after that, they weren't going to go away. And we haven't seemed to be able to change our tactics. We haven't promoted hunting for what it is. Look, are there bad eggs in the hunting community? Of course there are. There's bad eggs in every part of society, whether it's to do with football or any sport. There's corruption, there's bad eggs everywhere. But you can't crucify all hunters for a small group of people that are there. They do things not for the right reason. And
that's
hey,
very small. Sorry, Marco. Very small percentage that do occasionally do the wrong thing, and
it is.
We don't condone it whatsoever.
I want those people. I want those people prosecuted as much as anybody.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Sorry, Jay, did you have something to add there?
Yeah, I just want to touch on just a bit what you said. Marco, basically, an animal that is destined and raised for the purpose of being slaughtered and put on your plate, compared to a bird that's lived its entire life in a natural in its natural habitat, free. If you shoot it, it makes it to your plate. But if you're a shit shot like me, it lives another day, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. If I was going to get emotional about eating meat, if I was going to get emotional about it, if I was to have a time in my life where I reflected on eating meat, like a lot of people have, I would actually feel sorry for the sheep or for the cattle or for the chicken that basically they were born and destined to die. They were looked after.
Absolutely.
It's like they've been sort of cheated on. They think they're having a great life, but the ultimate existence of their lives was to get slaughtered. If I was to have an emotional check, I would probably stop eating, reared food. I would stop eating beef. I would stop eating lamb. I would stop eating chicken if I was to have an emotional check. But hunting, I look at hunting pretty much as I do fishing. I just love the idea to be able to go and harvest my own food. I mean, I grow my own veggies. I like to pick my own fruit. Hunting's just part of that. I'm gathering to eat. Yes, I enjoy eating wild meat. It's got different flavour to your beef and your chicken and your domestic stock. And I love cooking, so it inspires me to create different recipes. So, this image of us just being there and just wanting to shoot everything that flies, it's just nothing further from the truth. It really, really isn't.
All right, welcome back. And I'd just like to touch on a couple of points there that we've just been discussing around the livestock agriculture. And we really have to give a big shout out to our farmers. They're doing a tremendous job in feeding the country. And without them, the majority of people who don't hunt and supplement their hunting with farmed animals, which do live a very, very good life, has to be said. The farmers look after their livestock very, very well. They are also under a big attack by a lot of these lefty Greens, especially the Animal Justice Party, who would like to see the end of all animal agriculture. They are pushing just as hard to ban livestock farming as they are to ban duck hunting, horse racing, greyhound racing, dog breeding, and everything else that coincides with animal ownership. To be honest, they are really the biggest threat that we see in animal agriculture at the moment. They're not just targeting us. We are probably an easy target in the way that we harvest our meat, and we need to join forces. So a big shout out to our farmers and the tremendous job that they do in the way they look after their livestock and feed the country. Jay, did you want to continue on there with a couple of points?
Sure. So look, farmers in Australia and in Victoria, they are just like hunters in a way that they are extraordinarily vilified and attacked. Most people still participate in hunting, right? Whether or not they believe it or not, and that's going into the supermarket, right? They go into the supermarket, they say, oh, this is a good cut of meat, this is a bad cut of meat, I'm going to pick that up and take it home. Now, they're happy to do that, right? But they forget how that meat actually got there. And they forget the process, what's involved in that, and the hard work that's involved in getting and raising, rearing, obviously, an animal, making sure it's ethically taken care of, cleaned and produced, and then, distributed and packaged and taken to, obviously, the supermarket where it eventually ends up on your plate. Now, these guys should be Australia's heroes, right? Because as a result, everybody has something to eat. What we eat comes from a farmer, right? Now, if you look at how ridiculed farmers are by the same people who probably, who have no idea and who obviously attack our way of life, I'll give you an example. When we had those extraordinarily bushfires, and you would have heard the story about Cara Jade and the Gippy Goat Cafe. Now, that was, I believe, 2019. So if I'm wrong, somebody can clip me over the ears. But that was 2019, I believe. And she and about several others, extreme animal activists, they, over a number of months, they harassed and taunt the Gippy Goat Cafe, which obviously had a retail aspect to their farming side of things, right? They, over a number of weeks, they harassed their clientele, the business owners. Eventually, it got to the point where these extreme, and I'm not going to call them activists, I call them animal domestic terrorists, okay? because they broke into the Gippy Goat Cafe. They stole a number of lambs. I think there was about 7 that they stole. The police came. The animals were found to be under malnutrition because they weren't able to take care of it properly, nor did they have the knowledge to take care of it properly. They were charged and prosecuted, and Cara Jade, the ringleader, who recently appeared in court, might I add, received I think it was all up, it was a $2 fine. So it was a fine for breaking an entry and a fine for the stealing of the animal and something along those lines. And having an animal without a tag, something like that. We actually worked out to about $3. You got $1 per fine. That is a slap in the face. The Gippy Goat Cafe have since closed that thing because they're unable to operate under the extreme threats of terrorism by these anti-hunting and anti-agriculture groups, and they are suffering. So the hunters, the hunters and farmers, we're natural allies. We often have what I would call a symbiotic relationship, because one thing that when a farmer has, cattle or heads on their property, usually find pests, and they always appreciate a hunter coming along and taking care of pest control and management. And that symbiotic relationship has worked together for millions of years, and perhaps now we should really strengthen that relationship and take it down the political front, because these extreme animal domestic terrorists are just causing so much damage on all fronts.
No, very, very true. Very true. Marco, did you have something there?
Yeah, I agree with Jay. I've sort of lived in country Victoria probably for the last 30 years of my life. I've worked on farms as just a help, a labourer. I've driven tractors. I've worked in the shearing sheds. I've helped with the crutching of sheep and all that stuff. And I've never seen anything so putrid in my life as a fly-blown sheep. And if you remember, Dan, a while back, there was that thing by animal liberation people or animal justice or whatever they are, they were calling out to stop the mulesing of lambs. So, I mean, these are often people that have got no idea about what they're talking about. They see, they see that initial sort of mess, I guess. Of course, you're cutting skin, but it well fits the whole saying, there's no gain without pain. And I mean, those sheep, those lambs are subject to a little bit of discomfort for a short period of time. But then they basically live a very, very secure life. They're not going to get fly blown. They're looked after and everything else. Whereas these
what's
people
the alternative, Marco, if they don't?
Well, the alternative is the maggots attack them and they eat them. They eat the sheep from the inside out.
That's right.
That's the alternative. And they are. I mean, farmers have been vilified. They're sort of where once upon a time farmers were the hero of Australia. Australia was built on the back of a merino. Now they're classed as eco-terrorists, and it's. I can understand people worrying about the environment and all that sort of thing, but these people, there's no end to it. They seem to come up with a new agenda. As soon as you put rest to one, they come up with another agenda. Going back to what we do, our hunting. We started off, we had to pass an identification test. We had to pass a wit test, which is great. Fair enough. I'm all for it. Basically to satisfy the antis. And then they went on about the steel shot and the lead shot. So we replaced the lead shot with steel shot. We followed, we complied. We're showing all the time that we're looking after the environment. And then they're looking at wounding rates and all that sort of thing. Well, to me, a wounded duck is no different to a fish landed on a pier or a boat gasping for air. You put it out of its misery as soon as you can. At the end of the day, you take it home, you prepare it, and it goes on your plate. So their mentality is, in my opinion, is warped.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it very much is.
On every level. And the stuff they get away with, I mean, can you imagine, you know, the way I look at it is we pay for our day's hunting. We pay license fees. We pay registration of our guns. For those of us who have got dogs, we pay an annual upkeep of a dog, maintaining a dog. And when we go hunting, we pay fuel, we pay for everything, we pay for everything that we get on that day. It's all paid for by us. Okay?
$87 million, Marco. That's the tune it rang in 2019.
I don't know what that is individually, Jay, but I'm saying that you go to the nearest, if you live in Melbourne, you probably have to travel 2.5, 3 hours. So there goes a tank of fuel there and back. So you've paid for that day. You've set up your decoys. You're just wanting to have some peace and shoot a few ducks, and in come these protesters, okay? And they basically spoil your day. They've stolen that day, they've stolen that money away from you. And this 10-metre limit is a lot of crap.
Absolutely.
I mean, anybody that hunts ducks know how very, very much their senses are developed to avoid danger. They shy at the slightest movement. That's why we sit behind a hide. That's why we put ourselves, we conceal ourselves. And then you get these people that are allowed to stand 10 metres away from you, waving a flag, blowing a whistle, wearing high-vis vests, and they're stealing my day, a day that I've paid for. If the government's going to allow that to continue, we need to be compensated. Every time a day's stolen from me, there should be somewhere where I go and collect a couple of $100 because that person has just robbed me of my day's work, my day's money. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, perhaps maybe the GMA should offer a refund for every time they fail to adequately prosecute and charge any illegal activity by the protesters. I'm down for that. I know I'd get a few thousand every year.
Jay, you think about it. We've had them come in and harass us while we were camped. We had women in the camp. We had children in the camp. There was two pregnant women in our camp. They came in and harassed us in our camp. We weren't even hunting, but they have grown. They have got that cocky now that they are outrightly breaking the law. Now, can you imagine?
Have you seen that video, Marco, Dan, about that? There's a couple greenies, and they get approached by two GMA officers, and these greenies just give these GMA officers, just give them a whole bunch of trash talk, complete disrespect. And I was ashamed to see the GMA officers walk away with tail between their legs, and these two or three, domestic terrorists go around their day doing what they're doing. I'm very much for this refund policy, Marco.
Well, Jay, as you know, because we have a gun license, we have to keep ourselves squeaky clean in everything we do, okay? Because the minute we step out of line, we jeopardise the right to own a gun. And that's fair enough. I totally understand that. But why are we so under the microscope where these people are blatantly breaking the law? If they were to go in and break up any other group, they would get dealt with.
Yep.
But for us, the same law just doesn't seem to apply.
Yeah, and that's where the frustration comes from. To me, a lot of the animal activism is from a group of people that are outside trying to look in with no real understanding of what is entailed in what we do as part of our lifestyle, like you've pointed on, Marco, with our gun ownership, with all the licenses we hold, with the amount of money that we actually spend out of our own pocket. We fund our own hunting lifestyles. We don't get paid to go and hunt. We pay to hunt, whether it's through licenses, through fuel, all the apparel that we can, I was going to say consume, but we consume, you know, the animals we eat from the money that we spend. And the majority of the activists really, they don't understand, and they don't want to understand what we do or who we are, and they're not interested. I think we've all got lots and lots of stories of protesters, and just quickly, one story that I'd like to bring up is it was Bull Oak 1996. Obviously, most duck hunters will know on the opening weekend, we were hit by a tremendous storm on the opening weekend, and it really demolished most of the camps set up along the shores of Lake Bull Oak over near Donald. And for me, I didn't go out and hunt on opening morning. I was stuck in camp trying to look after my grandfather, who was, you know, showing signs of hypothermia from being in the cold and the wet, and that was my my main objective of the morning. Dad got out for a little bit of a hunt, but moving forward, we were lucky enough to get back to Bull Oak for the closing weekends, just Dad and myself. And we had been out on the Saturday hunt. We'd had our camp set up, and we come back in mid-afternoon, I suppose. It was a pretty long day, as you know. Dad always said middle, and it's a pretty big walk to get out to the middle of Bull Oak when it's, you know, up to 7 Ks wide in some spots. I think it was 7 Ks long. I can't remember, but I know we used to leave at, you know, 3 a.m. in the morning to get out to our spot to hunt by 7:20. But anyway, just getting off track a little. This particular afternoon, we'd come back in, and I think Dad had bagged out, and I was on my junior permit, so I could hunt under his supervision, had my game license. And there was a vehicle parked in our camp, and we were, you know, very concerned, dubious of what is this vehicle here parked literally in our camp. We couldn't light our fire because the vehicle was too close. We couldn't walk from underneath the veranda on our tent because the vehicle was literally parked in our camp. We had to maneuver around this vehicle to, sorry, I just lost my screen. Had to maneuver around this vehicle to do anything in our own camp. And originally we thought, oh, maybe it's a fellow hunter. Maybe he's come in on his own. He's seen that we're hunters. He's parked. It seemed strange where he was parked. Anyway, we were peering through the windows, trying to find a little bit of information on who this person could be. By this stage, it was getting late in the afternoon, and anyone who's hunted Bull Oak knows how treacherous Bull Oak is, full of dams, fence posts, old fences, barbed wire. It's really treacherous if you don't know what's underneath the water. And we seen rescue boxes in the back of the vehicle, other than some blankets. And we thought, okay, this seems like it's animal activists. Lo and behold, 10 minutes after, this lady comes tramping through the bush there. We knew there was a camp up behind us, and she comes tramping over there, probably maybe 80 meters from us. This lady started ripping strips off Dad, absolutely abusing her, foul language constantly, that this and that, and you're no good. You're trying to break into my vehicle. You're just murderers, you know, absolutely ripping strips off Dad. And I was only a junior. And Dad's, you know, he likes to avoid confrontation like most of us. But he actually had to speak up over the top of her to get her to stop, for one, because she was, you know, she was really, really upsetting us all. And Dad just come out with with a few explicits, which I won't repeat, but you can imagine what may have been the start of the conversation, and it was all within his rights. He went on to say how worried we were about the person that owned this vehicle getting late in the day, failing lights. We were actually getting our kayak and everything ready to go back out into the swamp to look for whoever it was, regardless if it was a hunter or an activist. We were concerned for that particular person. And I think every hunter has shown that same sort of concern. And after he said that, you know, how concerned we were, you should have seen the change in her face. And her face dropped and ended up apologizing to us, and then moved her vehicle. And I think that just goes to show she obviously had done that purposely to try and cause confrontation between ourselves as hunters and activists. And we weren't to know. They could have had cameras and filming and trying to catch us out on something. It was all preempted. And that was the actions they took to try and frustrate and anger Dad and myself. And Dad really turned it around on its head and got an apology out of this animal activist, and she left. But she'd been sitting there watching for 2 hours, us trying to maneuver around our camp with no regard at all, not just, you know, no regard for us being humans who are camped in our natural environment. You know, they look at us as the enemy. And it gets back to the point of they don't understand who we are, where we come from, what we do, and they don't want to understand. That's where it comes down to. And they just keep going out and harassing, jeopardizing their own safety and our own safety, and they don't care about the disregard any real consequences that may occur, you know, from them or us.
Just want to make a comment on that, Dan. You go, Marco, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, Daniel, I guess we've all had experiences with that. I mean, my son, who is now 35, started hunting. I got him out as soon as I could. And I mean, one time at Bull Oak again, we had some activists come into our decoys, and I just had to tell them to stop the language, you know, and they were women, mind you. And I said, listen, if I want my son exposed to that type of language, I'll bring him in a pub and sit him down on a pub bench, not here in the middle of nowhere with us, my brother and I and my son, and just relaxing. More and just on more, a little bit more on that. You know, I've often thought that Andrews government says that, you know, the Labor government, he says that they support hunting. Well, you know, if anybody's ever been out in the bay during the snapper season, there are hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of boats out in the bay. Now, can you imagine what would happen if some anti-fishing person, which, I mean, they're out there, I've seen them, they're starting to press on the fishermen as well.
5 years ago, the Animals Australia tried a campaign about fishing.
That's it. Now, can you imagine if they hired a boat or bought a boat and they started driving around and going through all the boats and, you know, doing passes where people are fishing, trying to cut their lines and all that? Can you imagine what would happen out there? And hey, that's coming. You know, the more they get away with breaking the law, the more they're going to push the boundaries. And if something's not done about it, eventually we don't know where it's going to finish.
I want to share something that's a little bit. I want to say add something onto that, Marco. It's something that actually disheartens me a little bit, and that is fishermen for the most part. I love fishing, right? When I'm not hunting, I'm usually fishing, right? When I'm not duck hunting, I'm deer hunting. When I'm not deer hunting, I'm fishing. Let's just change it that way. Now, one thing that I find a little bit disheartening about fishermen is that they feel that it's a hunting discipline, that their discipline is untouchable. And we're going through, obviously, these extreme pressure from the antis to pressure the government and everybody to ban duck season. And I just want to reiterate that, duck hunting is one very similar to fishing, where we sit in a location, in one location, and try to lure or bait an animal to come within distance so we can collect and harvest them. Very similar to fishing. Now, what fishermen particularly need to remember, and not just fishermen, but outdoor users and full stop, but particularly fishermen and women, is that once duck hunting goes, it's one of many dominoes. So as soon as duck hunting goes, it's just going to drop, and it's going to knock over. The next target's going to be the next thing. So I imagine the next target's probably going to be deer hunting once, if duck hunting goes. And, it goes down the line. Eventually, it's going to come to the point where fishing is on the agenda. And they're going to... the fishing is on the agenda, and they're not going to know what to do. If they don't defend all the other hunting disciplines, by the time it gets to fishing, there's going to be nobody left to represent them and help them out. So, if you're a fisherman, if you don't hunt, really encourage you at this point in time to support hunters and support duck hunters.
Well, Jay, going back some years, the deer hunters thought they were excluded from animal rights activists until they started pressing the agenda with trying to ban the use of hounds, which they did eventually. They banned the use of a particular hound. I mean, some of those hound crews had lines of hounds that they used for generations. And I remember, I was a member of a hunting crew at the time, and the person that I hunted with, he didn't want to destroy his dogs, so he opted out and stopped hunting deer with his dogs and started hunting foxes because they banned the use of foxhounds, and now they're hunting with beagles and bloodhounds. But what I'm saying is, they're not going to leave any group alone.
Absolutely.
They are there. It's just a group of people that don't like another group of people. And that's all it is. It's just, they say the trend today is tolerance. Well, they are some of the most intolerant groups that you could ever come across.
Yeah, that is
absolutely
very, very true. We are a community of people who continue to get discriminated against. Why are we any different to any other group who cries discrimination and then starts up, actions to change legislation? Where we have been here forever and ever. We've been treated the same, disregarded, disrespected.
I've been thinking of a video ad, a series of video ads, Dan, and they might not be exactly PC. So you may want to remove this potentially, but maybe not. They're a duck hunter. I admit that I used to say I'm going camping this weekend. Now I don't, obviously. Now I say I'm going duck shooting this weekend, or I'm going to go shoot some bunnies, or I might go, deer stalking, or might go with my old man on the hounds, whatever, right? But before I never used to, and I think it's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek kind of way to encourage hunters to say, don't be ashamed of who we are.
No, that's right. Never be ashamed. Never ever be ashamed. And is that saying that how do you know who's a vegan? Don't worry, they'll tell you. It's a little bit about the same with duck hunting. I try and get that into a conversation somewhere wherever I can. I'm proud of it. I've never hidden from it, and I encourage everyone else, don't hide from who you are. wear that with a badge of pride and honor that you're involved in a community of people that are exactly the same as you. For some respect, we're all individuals, obviously, but we come from a much bigger perspective on life. We look at things differently to others, and that's okay. But we have to remember there's 26,000 plus, and the number keeps growing and growing as a lot of these new juniors and stuff come through and get their game licenses. We've got to encourage them, help them out. We are a legitimate group of people that we've been here for as long as anyone can remember. I've been doing a little bit of research, and Dad's been helping me, been flicking me through some internet searches and some research he's been doing about the history of duck hunting. And we've still researching it, but as long as Aboriginals have been in Australia, they've hunted ducks. There's claims of the Aboriginals have been here for 80,000 years. There's been 80,000 years of duck hunting in Australia. We can't deny that. That's how they gathered their food. They've hunted kangaroos. They've hunted possums. They've hunted
wombats.
Exactly. All types of native animals in Australia have been hunted for as long as there's been human inhabitants. And that stems back to the Aboriginals. There were some pretty good articles of duck hunting in the Americas and some tactics on how the Native American Indians used to harvest ducks, and even the Egyptians. They used to make decoys and strap to their heads and have a straw, like what is it called? A snorkel, so they can swim up and pluck the ducks by the legs. I
if they ever take my firearms license, that's what I'll be doing there.
I've got references to the Aboriginals in Australia doing the same thing. With their particular, there's numerous types of boomerangs that were used for different hunting methods, and they used to throw boomerangs into mobs of black duck and teal and whatever the duck species may have been, galahs, corellas. They used to eat them all. So do
you think there would have been some problems with wounding rates?
Oh, there would have been lots of wounding rates, and the thing with that is, how are the birds of prey going to eat? That's an easy meal, so it's not like they're going to waste. The birds of prey, wedge-tailed eagles, hawks, lizards, the big goannas that live around the swamps and waterways, they benefit from ducks that we can't find. We try our hardest to pick them up, but if that wasn't found, the birds of prey, the lizards, they take that opportunity and they feed, and that helps promote their population, healthy populations, and it's an easy feed for them. So it's not like it's going to waste and they're just rotting away like the animal activists would make you believe. Even if there's a wounded bird that may have still a little bit of kick or bit of life left in it, hopping around the bank somewhere, it's only a matter of time, within probably minutes before a bird of prey is going to come down and snatch that duck up, put it out of its misery, take it back and feed its young. So that's where we need to try and keep our stories relevant and tell these.
I've actually seen something a bit interesting, Dan. Sorry to cut you off a little bit, but I once saw a wounded bird, and as I was going to collect it on my little punt, it actually got swallowed whole by, I think, would have been a carp.
There you go.
Just swallowed it before I could even grab it.
We're going to take a quick break. All right, welcome back. The next topic that I wanted to touch on, guys, was data and facts. And do you think that the data and facts has really been taken into account, or whether there's been more of a predetermined thinking pattern on our duck season, on determining our duck season? The data and facts argument seems to be getting pretty old. It obviously is very relevant because it states exactly what is happening, but there's lots and lots of misleading information in there. And I know, Jay, we took part in our own waterfowl surveys, surveying swamps and creeks and dams, and there was a lot of data that we, as the VDHA, submitted in our submission that seemed to get overlooked a bit. Do you want to fill us in there on some of that data that we found and your thoughts on whether it was really taken into consideration or not?
Sure. So obviously, us, the Victorian Duck Hunters Association, we participated in the stakeholder considerations process. Now, as you know, Dan, over the months of November and December, and even I think we did a little bit in early January, just after New Year's, we went around across the state to state game reserves and just wetlands and bodies of water. We conducted our own counts, and we submitted that data along with our recommendations to the Game Management Authority. We were the only hunting organisation to actually provide data to support our claims, right? And the only other stakeholder that provided data to support their claims was BirdsLife Australia. Now, in the recent recommendations by the GMA to the minister, they recently released that document, and in it says they didn't take any consideration of the data that the VDHA provided because they didn't provide a methodology. Or we didn't provide a methodology. Now, which it's bizarre because we provided a summary of our data. We also mentioned that it's available to them if they want to see the inner workings. And we also sat through the consideration process, and we never were once asked to provide an explanatory on that data, which obviously our recommendations was for a full bag and a full season. So if you were to answer your initial question, Dan, yes, they had a predetermined decision because there were 4 hunting stakeholders that provided their recommendations and their submissions, and not one of their recommendations that we provided or the other hunting organisations provided were put in. The only one that was accepted from the hunting organisation was the Wednesday start, which I believe it was a recommendation by the Field and Game. But that's the only hunting recommendation that was put in there. Now, what I want to mention is in the Game Management Authority's recommendation booklet or documentation that they provided, it said that there is numbers declining significantly. And I want to draw your attention to what I refer to as rats on wings, the Australian wood duck. They're everywhere. Now, there are 450,000 dams in Victoria that we know of, right? There could be more, but there are 450,000 known dams in Victoria. About 70% of those, I can't remember the exact details of how many megalitres of water, but we surveyed over 1,000 of our members, and we got about 200 responses with regards to people with dams on their property.
Can I just pull you up for a second, Jay?
Yep.
We have to probably mention that data on the 450,000 dams in Victoria is data that was taken from, and I've got it here. I did mention these figures in an article that was recently put in our local paper. So it just to give you a couple of figures there, the Department for Environment, Land, Water and Planning
that's right.
states 450 dams equaling a storage capacity of around 3.4 million megalitres.
That's right.
That's right. So there's some official figures there that we have sought out to prove our our claims. So and it was 70% of dams hold water at any one time out of those 450. So that equals out to 315,000 dams at any one time will have water.
If there was one bird on them.
Yeah, that's right.
If there is, we found that there were, through our survey data, through our membership, and even through just counting them through doing our normal trips, we found if on average there were 6 birds on every dam, right? But let's just say the worst case scenario that there's 1 bird on 70% of those dams, there would be 315,000 ducks that were not included in the Game Management Authority's recommendations. If the worst case scenario that there's 6 birds on every one, we're looking at almost 1.9 million birds missing. Now, this is just from dams. They don't take account the birds that are in your local park, the birds that are in creeks. They don't, large bodies of water that hold, permanent bodies of water that always hold birds. They don't take those into account. We went to, during our duck counts, we went to the Werribee Water Treatment Facility, and we estimate a count of about 60,000 birds at that time, and a lot of honkers, so a lot of mountain ducks and blackies and all that sort of stuff, a lot of grey teal. Geez, for some reason, grey teal seem to be everywhere now that they've decided that they're not to be included in the bag limit across the Princess Freeway, because ducks apparently can't fly from one side of the bridge to the other side of the bridge. It just is ludicrous, right? So there is a lot of unaccounted for data. We actually, this makes me sick a little bit to say this, but we have actually some mutual ground on some points with the Animal Justice Party, and that is that we don't believe the data is accurate. Animal Justice Party obviously thinks it's worse than what it is, and we believe it's much more better. And frankly, being out there in the swamps over the months of November and December and a bit of January, I've got ducks splashing around on the side of the roads in my street with ducklings because there's so much water. And the GMA's decision was quite clearly predetermined.
Yep. No, thanks for that, Jay. Marco, you had a couple of opinions there too, didn't you?
Well, I just want to add to what Jay said. I totally believe, although data is very important, obviously, how many creeks are there in Australia, in Victoria alone, that aren't, they're not checked for ducks? I've got a dam on my 3-acre property about the size of a small bedroom, and I got a hell of a fright before because I walked down to my cages where I breed birds, and a pair of blackies got up. They frightened the hell out of me, out of the reeds. They're just everywhere. And it's like for quail hunting, it's the same thing. For every property that we gain permission on, there'd have to be 10 or 20 or 30 or 50 properties that we aren't allowed to hunt on. And it's all refuge for quail. I've often driven around areas where the paddocks look fantastic, but I know that particular farmer doesn't allow people on. And I just look at it and say, oh, well, the quail are there for next year. I mean, they've got to have a refuge to be able to breed. And Australia's definitely got plenty of those areas where they can breed as well. Look, this isn't about data. This isn't about moral. This isn't about anything. This is about a group of people who don't agree with our way of life. And it wouldn't matter if it rained for 12 months of the year and we got flash flooding. It wouldn't matter if there was flooding in the Noah days. It wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter if there was millions and billions of ducks everywhere. they still wouldn't want us to do what we do. This
Absolutely.
isn't about data and figures, and we put these arguments forward to prove our point. But the reality of it is, when you come down to it, it's just a group of people that aren't tolerant to another group of people. That's basically what it boils down to.
Yeah, that has hit the nail on the head, Marco. We have the facts and data to back up our claims. That's probably the difference between us as hunters and the anti-hunting activists. We actually have the data and the facts that we have sought out as organisations to prove our claims. And I too believe that the data argument is really getting old, and it's not really getting listened to. We've seen it year after year.
By either side.
Yeah, exactly. The figures show, the variation in years on seasons in duck populations and water availability is up and down, up and down, up and down. And we've all seen the graphs of Professor Kingsford, who conducts the Eastern Australian water bird count. And his graph shows, as plain as day, that the abundance of ducks up and down, up and down, up and down across the eastern seaboard, eastern states of Australia, which is Victoria, Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland. And obviously we all know duck populations and duck numbers vary. It's not that they're not there, they move around, and it comes down to any one day of his survey in particular, even our individual surveys. If they're not there on that day, they're not there on that day. They could be back there 2 hours after we leave. They could be back there the next morning. It just goes to show that it's very unpredictable, but on a whole, even Dr. Kingsford states, Professor Kingsford states, I should say, and this is a statement that, some people try and disregard. I'm just going to read it from when I added it into this article. I can't find it, but he states in a submission paper that him and 3 other professors submitted, which I think, if you want to read it for yourself, it's in the Sydney Library Archives or the University of New South Wales Archives, that all scientific studies prove that duck hunting has no detrimental effect on duck populations. It comes solely down to habitat destruction. And that leads me back to the efforts of duck hunters in particular, who back in 1958 self-imposed a license structure on ourselves for generations to be under the restraints of our license process, and no one's complained about it. The license process was solely put in place to sustain duck hunting for the future generations, because they didn't want to see our duck populations diminish any further. They didn't want to see our natural habitats diminish any further. They actually put that money in to purchasing what we now know as our state game reserves. There's 199 state game reserves across Victoria that were brought by duck hunters back in 1958 to protect duck numbers, protect habitat, and promote a sustainable hunting future for me, for my kids, and for my grandkids. So,
mind if I ask you a question, Dan?
Go for it, Jay.
If those, our forefathers, those hunters, didn't self-impose that licensing system and put those 100 and create those 199 state game reserves, we didn't do that. What do you think those what do you think would have happened to the land that those state game reserves now sit on?
So I personally think that most of them would not have seen water maybe since the 50s. There's been a lot of redirection of water, not just for agriculture. We know agriculture needs water, but there's been lots of redirection of water for other recreational uses to fill certain lakes for water skiing, for instance, that has had a detrimental effect on the natural flood of our state game reserves. Now, there is infrastructure in place to fill most of these state game reserves on a non-natural flood or filling event, which we welcome with open arms, and that's what the duck hunters of 58 put in place. That they stipulated that these wetlands have to be preserved. So there's been infrastructure to divert water to them. Obviously, we've seen more recently with the vast majority of environmental flows heading down the Murray River that no one has access to, including agriculture and our local Victorian state game reserves, that is flowing into a particular waterway in South Australia and then straight out to sea with no real benefit. That type of action has detrimental effect on our state game reserves in Victoria, for one, and we don't have any say about it. And that's been put on us by environmentalists, by greenies, to do that.
If you have a look at the Lake Connewarre, particularly Hospital Swamp, it's currently where it's positioned. The only reason why the Lake Connewarre Hospital Swamp in particular, the only reason why that is not developed residential land is because it's a state game reserve and hunters pushed back. And there's still, to this day, council applications and industry applications closer and closer trying to push the boundaries of that state game reserve so they can push in some more housing and more commercial developments and all that sort of stuff. I would guess personally, at very minimum, at least half of the current state game reserves would be developed under property and used for some.
They would have been drained. They would have been drained.
Getting back to that question, Jay, what do I think would have happened? Prime example is Lake McCowan, what we know as the Whitten wetlands. That has been an absolute disaster of a wetland that was decommissioned, for one, as a water store, and then the environmentalist groups was promoting this ecotourism, spending millions of dollars developing a cafe, environmental type center and a boardwalk, and it's been an absolute fizzer. I don't think they've had a visitor, to be honest. There might have been a handful, but they spent millions of dollars on trying to develop that as an ecotourism spot that we all know has not worked whatsoever. To just imagine if they got their hands on 199 state game reserves and tried to spend that type of money redeveloping them. And we all know that bird watchers don't pay a license or a fee, and they expect to come in and see sustainable water levels and sustainable bird numbers for them to go and watch their ducks and other bird species without contributing an absolute cent to that activity, where we pay, $340 million a year as a hunting community, as a whole, I should say, on putting back into our natural environment and our hunting practices. 87 million is generated directly from duck hunters and quail hunters. That a lot of that, I don't know the breakdown, more of that should be going back into state game reserves. I know a percentage does, but I think there's probably still an avenue to put more back in. But getting back to the argument on the bird watching tourism, that is an option. And I don't think any duck hunter would argue that it is not a viable practice, as long as the participants of the bird watching community pay some sort of fee to put back into wetlands, habitat, and promoting bird life numbers, if they're willing to do that, and obviously
and spend 9 months of the year actually maintaining it. Don't forget that.
Yeah, that's right. I was getting to that point. As hunters, we utilize the swamps for, on a normal season, what is it, 3 months?
Yeah, that's right.
There's I don't think, as long as they're not going to jump up and down about our conservation works that take place on many state game reserves by hunters, they can have the run of it for the other 9 months of the year for their bird watching practices, as long as they're going to contribute back to the industry, contribute back to the wetland, and do some conservation work of their own. I don't see them wanting to do that at all.
It would be the perfect equilibrium, Dan. They will leave us alone for 3 months of the year and maintain our swamp for 9 months of the year. So we don't have to do all the hard yards. Fantastic.
Daniel,
it could work like that. I don't
Daniel,
think just give up our conservation work, though.
No.
Daniel, just from a personal experience, I started duck hunting when I was 12 years old. And I'm one of those people that have been blessed enough to be able to hunt most weekends of every season. And I can tell you, in the 46 years that I've been hunting, ducks have not diminished in numbers. And that's just from personal experience. You'll get years where there'll be more. You'll get years where there's less. Usually when it's less, it's because they've had floods and cyclone scenarios interstate. And, you'll go to your local wetland and there won't be any ducks there. And you think, well, it's going to be a quiet year. All of a sudden, 2 months down the track, a little bit further into the season, it's like the wetland is just alive with birds. That's been the pattern for 46 years. It's never, ever changed. And contrary to the lies that the antis will tell people, they say that, Victoria is the only state. Well, a lot of the other states that have actually banned game bird hunting, they are still allowed to take duck on permits.
Yep, that's right.
Every year. So, because they've banned the season, but the ducks are obviously getting out of hand in some scenario, and so that they are issued permits and they're allowed to take ducks on permits. So our duck populations are healthy. Hunters will always strive to make the conditions better for the ducks because it's in our interest, obviously, to do it. America have got that program called Ducks Unlimited, where they actually put a lot of money back into wetlands. And again, the same scenario. I think it's something that's worldwide. I think if you look at facts, hunting actually sustains a lot of game species worldwide.
Absolutely,
that's right.
I very much believe that ducks need hunters, and the supposed data that the Game Management Authority and they say there's been a constant decline year after year of duck population. But one consistency is that while it might be going down like this, at the same time, constantly for 9 months of the year, you've got hunters making sure that they are doing nest boxing programs and promoting breeding. So if the data that the Game Management Authority and the antis are saying is true and that there's a plummet, guess what? Duck hunters are the safety blanket to ensure that the population remains sustainable. If they weren't around and the data is correct, eventually it's just going to go down until there's nothing left.
Yeah. Well, if you look at it from that point of view, if we stop doing it, who's going to do it? There's nobody else doing it.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of these animal activists think that we'll just leave nature alone and it'll take care of itself. And yes, it does in some respect. And I'm pretty confident that, give it a number of years after a particular event that might wipe out human population, that nature will take back over. But we've also got to remember humans are a part of nature. We have been a part of nature since we evolved into what we are now. We didn't stand in our cities and look at the bush from the outskirts. We came from that bush, and we have had a driving fact in developing and evolving within our natural environment with all animal species for as long as anyone can remember, as long as we've been on this planet. And I know I'm probably upsetting a fair few religious people now, but that's the facts. We've evolved, and we've evolved out of the bush, and hunting has been the driving force in our evolution, eating red meat, hunting our game, which then turned into farming vegetables and farming crops and then farming livestock. So we can't say that we're just outside looking in. That's where we came from, is that natural environment. Well, that's us. That's who we are.
We maintain our historical roots.
Well, Daniel, I guess whether we've evolved or not, we've always been meat eaters.
Yeah, that's right. I probably should add, the arguments out there. However we came to be on this planet, we walked out of the bush.
Pretty much.
Yes. All walked into it.
All walked into it. And
we probably had shit stuck to our ass.
we can safely say we're still walking into the bush on a daily basis, and we're still trying to preserve it and live within it, take from it as much as we need and give back as much as it needs. That's what it comes down to. Our aesthetic appreciation of our natural environment. Most people don't understand how we feel about our natural environment. And I feel one with the bush, with nature, and that link between hunting helps secure that emotional attachment I have. And that's where I see a lot of these anti-activists coming out of the city that haven't had that emotional experience, who connect on a completely different level and don't understand what Mother Nature can give and what Mother Nature can receive, and trying to dictate to us who have grown up there, who are contributing to it, and dictate to us what we can and can't do. That's really, what upsets me. We've got 5 minutes left, guys. Did you want to add something quickly, Marco? Then we're going to move on to Jay and give us an update on our e-petition.
All I'd like to say, it's a debate that will probably never ever end. But I always take it back to the fact that it's just a group of people that are not tolerant of another group of people's chosen lifestyle. That's basically what it comes down to. And, I thought in this day and age, we were over that. We're told to be tolerant to every group of people, to every idea, to every mindset. We're told that, tolerance is fashionable these days. But these antis are out of fashion big time when it comes to us.
Yeah, no, very well put, Marco. E-petition, Jay.
Yes. So very exciting. I've just had a look at our e-petition, and we're just short of 3,000, and we've hit over the 48 hours mark since we've actually submitted our e-petition following the disgusting announcement on Saturday that just passed. Now, our e-petition, like I said, we're almost at 3,000, but it's calling on the government to do three things, and the first one being to review the GMA's handling of the considerations, or the 2021 duck season considerations process, for the government to dismiss their announcement and revert back to the legislation, which stipulates 10 birds and 12 weeks, and for the government, particularly the Ag Minister, to directly communicate and consult with hunters and the hunting organisations like us and ADA and all those other ones, to communicate directly with us, to get a bit of an understanding of the issues and concerns that hunters are facing. Like I said, we've reached over 3,000. We're at the moment, we're the second highest petition that's travelling. Ideally, I want to get this over the 5,000 mark. Anything above that will send an absolute strong message to the government. So if you haven't signed it yet, obviously, we'll post a link in the description. But also, if you have signed it, make sure you share it to everybody. We need everybody to jump on board. And if your mate is a fisher and he tells you it doesn't, why should I sign it? It doesn't affect me. We'll explain to him the conversation that we had a bit earlier on about the many dominoes, and that, fishing is one of them. So it doesn't matter what you do, whether you're a hunter, you're a fisher, a deer hunter, whatever, please sign the petition.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Marco. You can find the link to that e-petition on our Facebook page and our website at vicduckhunters.com, but we'll put a link up at the end of this podcast too for anyone who hasn't signed it. And yeah, this has been the first of what I think can be many little podcast collaborations. And yeah, we're still learning. This is our opinion on how we see the state of affairs on Victorian duck hunting at the moment. We're all individuals. We all have our own take on things. But as a hunting community, this is the time we really have to band together, and we have to push forward for our hunting future. If you want to see your kids, your grandkids, your grandkids' kids, if you want them to grow up in the hunting way of life, we need to continue to act now, fight for our rights, and show these anti-hunting groups that we're not going to lie down and be quiet. So thanks, Marco. Thanks, Jay.